Welcome to another edition of Expanding Mind. I'm your host, Erik Davis, continuing our conversations about the cultures of consciousness. Last summer, when I was spending a lot of time, too much time perhaps, at West Coast festivals, I had the opportunity to see a unusual Qawwali group a few times. Name of the group is Fanna-Fi-Allah. And I had seen Qawwali before and enjoyed a fair amount on recording. Lucky, back in the day, as they say, to see the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan in New York a couple times when I was a music critic. And there was a brief period when he was a little bit of a hit superstar from a Western secular music perspective. There were records produced by Peter Gabriel's label that actually fashioned a hit, Must. And it was a great experience because Qawwali is this one of those wonderful streams of world music, of human music that combines tremendous sacred intensity and spiritual focus with such exuberance that even the secular fools and cynical rock critics in the audience love it. The more I've gotten into sacred music in the last 20 years of my life, which is a lot of what I listen to in the widest possible senses, Qawwali remains one of the most sort of powerful and transformative ones, although I don't know as much about it as I would like. So I was very happy to see Fanna-Fi-Allah, who's made up mostly of North Americans, of white folk. And I was very impressed with their performance and also with a teaching lesson that was given by the head fellow, Tahir Faridi Qawwal. And he was speaking a little bit about learning rags and singing, and it was actually a lesson. It was one of the better parts of this one festival, went to Beloved, where people would actually not just perform but give a lesson. So people in the audience who were interested in singing and interested in spiritual music could learn a great deal, and it was a wonderful experience. So I thought Tahir lived in Nevada City for a while. They lived around, because I first heard about them from hippie friends in the Sierras, but I finally reached him in Australia on the lip of a summer tour, and so he's up late. And Tahir, thanks so much for sticking with me temporarily here. Welcome to Expanding Mind.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Cool. Well, I think an easy and obvious place to start out is your own story. When you were young, you first heard this music. I mean, Fanna-Fi-Allah has been going on for like 17 years now, so it's a good chunk of time. How the heck did you get on this path?
Oh, wow. Talking about myself, huh? It's the classic question now. I get it
It
all the
is.
time,
I mean, in a way,
especially even in India and Pakistan, everybody's quick to ask what the history of how somebody in from such a distant reality, culturally and religiously and spiritually and just demographically, could get so deep into something. But it also follows the history of the music and the way it's traveled and the history of the music itself and how it's evolved. But yeah, it really drew me in a deep way, and beyond the inherent beauty of the music, there's just something extremely fulfilling about the practice of this music that keeps me and my group deeply knotted together in the practice and the love of it. And so, as a young explorer of spiritual culture and direction in life in my early teens, I was really attracted to the music of India, the classical music, and that came a lot from the God rock kind of groups like Quintessence and the Beatles and the Incredible String Band. I was like 14 and 15. And I was always so fascinated with those instruments, like the sounds of the sarangi and the sitar and the tabla and tampura inside of those recordings. So, followed those to find Ravi Shankar, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan and Nikhil Banerjee and all those great masters of classical music. And the more that I heard that music, the more that I just fell in love with it. And it's something, beyond words. You can try to explain what is the attracting factor and why, but there was a chord touch really deep inside. So began studying the classical music, and at that time I was also studying the language of Hindi and Sanskrit and Persian. And something about when I stumbled upon Qawwali, actually listening to a CD of Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, or back then it was probably tapes or 8 tracks or something. The Last Prophet, that album, and I was the melodies were so catchy, and after listening to the album once, like the melodies just kept going around and around in my head, and I was recognizing the raga, like the whole musical design and a lot of those techniques that I had learned through my classical studies, and I just felt like studying the music. And from it's a long story, but to keep it short, basically, finally um, went to a Qawwali ceremony for the first time when I was, I think, 19 in Varanasi. I'd been listening to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and the Sabri brothers and a lot of the heavy hitters that were available in recordings. And I heard this Qawwali ceremony in India, and I was like, wow, this is really bad. This isn't the Qawwali that I'm used to hearing. I want to track down these masters and the style. So I went back to my room in the middle of the night and figured out as much as I could of Allahu, writing all the verses out from an old cassette with the headphones on and figuring out on my mandolin at the time and singing the verses. And one thing led to another, and the group was formed back in 2000, and the idea behind that was an experiment to bring together 7 of my close friends who are deeply also interested in Indian classical music and devotional music, and had this, I guess, a colorful past in the same way of spiritual searching, especially in the East. And the idea was to spend 3 hours 3 times a week for 3 months and learn 4 Qawwali songs. So we would sit together and had all the lyrics transcribed for everyone, and we'd gone over it and really enjoyed the fraternity of sitting together and learning music as a group like that, because it's unique. While classical music or other music can be like 2 people or 3 people, Qawwali involved a whole group learning experience and singing together, and it culminated with a performance that I had arranged. And it was very well attended, the performance, about 300 people, and people just loved it, and we just loved it. So from that point, it just grew and grew and grew.
Tell me about some of your teachers, whether your earliest teachers or the ones where it became a more traditional kind of teaching relationship. Because of course, teaching these classical forms is not just about teaching the music. It's a whole introduction to a life. It's often carried through these traditional families. So I'd love to hear about some of the most important teachers and what they were like, and how your relationship evolved.
Yeah, I just had a similar interview with BBC a couple of days ago about this, because that was from like a Pakistani Asian network, where the way they saw it is it's very difficult to get into the whole teacher-disciple relationship in Pakistan, because the music, like you say, flows within the lineages of the families in a very strong way with a lot of integrity over many, many generations. So someone can't just like go to Pakistan or India and pop in a few hundred rupees and learn a Qawwali. It's very hidden, and it's such a sophisticated art that it takes so many years that it's very few people that learn it at a certain level and from such great masters that I've been blessed to learn from. And So there was several steps in it. When I was, I was 16, I had a Sanskrit teacher, so I was learning a lot about the culture and the language at that point. And then I had a tabla master from Punjab who taught me in my native town of Nova Scotia, Canada, where I'm from. And he also tuned me into a lot of the Punjabi elements of the music. He's from Punjab. And the stories of the Sufi masters. So one thing led to another. Then studying in India and finding a master there until I went to Pakistan with Amina for the first time and had already learned a bunch of Qawwalis as best as we could from recordings and studying the music through the classical music of India, which is the same technical background and basis. And heard really good Qawwali for the first time at the shrine of Baba Farid Shakarganj, one of the great Sufi masters, and at his shrine in a village called Pakpatan inside of Punjab, Pakistan, in that traditional setting of Qawwali where at the shrine Qawwals just play all day and all night. So there'll be for about an hour or so a different Qawwal group that will sit down that has a lineage of hundreds of years behind them sitting at that shrine in the same way. And the music was so profound for that reason, just how deeply connected the music was to the place and how long people have been learning it and how it's evolved in that traditional and devotional setting. And it was when we went to the Urs of Data Ganjabaksh in Lahore about a month later that we see all the heavy hitter Qawwals that we've been listening to on recordings for so long, because that's one of the big Urs, like the wedding, what's like a marriage ceremony of a Sufi master, which is his like samadhi, his Fanna. It's a commemoration of his final union with God, with the beloved. And so there's several solid days, like 3-4 days of solid Qawwali, and all the biggest Qawwali masters come to play at that. And we seen our, the people we had listened to with such reverence for several years on recordings and seen it live. It was so powerful. And I remember asking somebody, where can I meet one of these Qawwals? I was, really nervous and excited. And like, oh, just at the Pilot Hotel, just around the block, you can go there. And I think most of the Qawwals stay there while they're in town. It's like, oh, really? So went to this hotel and at the reception there was all like the room numbers and all the Qawwals had their business cards like connected to each of the room numbers. Like, no way. So straight went to like, okay, Ustad Rahat Fateh Ali Khan, who's the successor of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, as you know, in room such and such. So we just went up, knocked on the door, and he's like, oh, hi, Assalamu alaikum. I'm like, walaikum salam, come on in for some chai, let's hang out. Like, what are you guys up to? And not, not, you don't see white people in that setting. I'm like, oh, I've been studying Qawwali music and I'm very passionate about that, but I wanted to come back to the root of this music to really study it and find a master and blah, 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 blah. And before taking this music any further, I really want to have some proper guidance. And he's like, oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, sing something. So I sung some licks and he's like, oh, you're sounding really good. Why don't you just come over to my place after the Urs and just, you know, live live with me for a little bit and I'll show you around the ropes. So we went to the home of Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan where he used to live when he was alive. And they gave us the room where his brother lived when he was alive, and we stayed there for a good month and just learned the music every day, every day, every day. And when there was a Qawwali ceremony, which was most nights, we go with Rahat and his group members and sit with them on stage while they played, and so on and so forth. And in this way, most of the great Qawwali masters have had us in their homes for a period of weeks or months or even years, and just taught us and taught us and taught us, and we've just been there, at their feet with reverence and a lot of love for the music, and they see that and they appreciate that and they honor that very deeply. So there's that was the only bridge to cross. There was that distance and that love for the music that brought us to these masters, and they've taught us well, and they continue to teach us in that way.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. I mean, because it makes you realize that from one perspective, it's incredibly novel and unusual what you did, you and Amina, and just the whole story. But on another level, you're like, well, yeah, but these things they spread. They move, they change. If you look at the whole history of Qawwali or the history of Indian classical music, it's not like it started out and everybody was just doing it. It's like it spreads and it spreads into different cultures, and maybe it's not across a huge ocean with people from a different ethnic stock for the most part, but it is that too. Gypsy music evolves from Rajasthan, and there's music is much more fluid than we sometimes think it is when we associate it simply with a particular nation or a particular ethnicity even. And so on another level, it's just about the universality of music and the way in which it can bring people into devotion and into a sacred exuberance that is kind of universal, and that isn't does Fana means union, right? In
Yeah,
the name of
it means, yeah, the direct translation is closer to annihilation, but it's in that sense of like the ultimate destination spiritually, when that concept of separate self is annihilated in that love, that ishq, that divine love with the beloved, with God, with the ultimate.
Well, I wanted to ask you one thing is that you had mentioned that this adventure had happened with Amina Kisti, I think I'm pronouncing it, and
Shishti,
she's a she. Yeah, and she's a she, which adds another wrinkle into the tale. I think you mentioned in one of the interviews I read that one of the traditional places to perform in Pakistan and in India is of course at shrines. So you're in a sacred architectural space where that's set off from the secular world. What's it like being? What's her experience, or what are some of the resistances and acceptances around her? Just because it is a traditionally male form, so that must be an additional. It's like here come the whiteys. Oh yeah, and one of them's got long hair. No, I mean not long hair like your long hair, but one of them's female.
yeah, it's been an interesting journey, that one. You know, essentially those, that have read the poetry of the Sufis or have transliterated or learned the meanings of the Qawwalis that are sung, it's very rebellious music, to different extents. But for the most part, the Sufis are very colorful and diverse people, and not afraid of breaking boundaries. And just like in the creativity of the music, there's a deep respect for transcending layers or transcending veils. And traditionally, women in, say, Pakistan or Sufi culture in the Indian subcontinent, they also sing the same poetry and they have the same genre of music. It's not exactly Qawwali, because Qawwali is suited for males in the way that, the key of the music is in the arrangement. And what's unique is that the tabla of Qawwali, the rhythm instrument, is very different from like a classical one. It's very heavy, the style of playing. It's more folky in a way, and the drums themselves are different, even though they're tablas. The bass drum is actually quite a large wooden hollow drum that like a wet chapati is pasted onto every time you play, to give that super heavy bass sound that's modulated, that thumps so hard in the Qawwali. So the tabla role is often seen as like the most grueling and rigorous and powerful role, and that's what Amina plays. So that's especially interesting. Also, it's not just that she's singing some Qawwali, she's playing the role, and often the tabla players are like really big and really fat Punjabis and chewing pan the whole time and just pounding away on these drums. and yeah, she just loved the music, just like I did, and wanted to learn the music. And she also started from a classical base of learning the classical tabla, and then dholak, and then took on the Qawwali tablas properly. And people were really astounded by this. And and when we studied with Ustad Rahat Fateh Ali Khan for the first time in Faisalabad in Pakistan, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's tabla player was there playing with Rahat and was actually living in his home often because they were playing so many shows that there was just not time to go home to Lahore. So he was there and teaching her while I was learning with Rahat, like the vocal styles, and we were just rocking out and playing for a lot of long hours in those days, as we still do. And Rahat was like, "Listen, it's not a bad idea to take this Westerner and this female on in this tradition. She's so into it, and with that amount of passion for this music, it could really help it open up to some unusual places, in the West, and help bridge this music. And they just love to share it like any other spiritual music. It's not coveted. It's shared openly, but the learning process is so rigorous. So there's a whole um, succession of levels of what to learn, and the devotion of the student really guides that whole thing. So because she was initiated by this master who's considered, the best Qawwali tabla player of this current generation, she's been respected because of that, especially. And he's taken her on and taught her for months and months and months after months in his home, and she's lived with him and been taken in to learn this music deeply. And the whole connection to the shrines is very interesting because women are not permitted to perform Qawwali at the shrines of male saints. And so we'd go to these shrines, like you're probably familiar with, like Nizamuddin Aulia in Delhi, or Kalir Sharif in Kalir in northern India. A lot of these shrines are quite major pilgrimage points for Sufis throughout the Indian subcontinent. And so I'd go there, in the early days, 15 years ago, with the whole group, and she wasn't, of course, allowed to play with the group in these places. So we just snag one of the solid local dholak players or whoever was playing. And also in Pakistan, in the same way, we'd recruit one of the solid tabla players to play with us. And since, the genre crosses over to anyone, someone can just pick it up that knows the music, one of the masters, and slam it pretty easily. And then finally, it was in Pakpatan also at the shrine of Baba Faridi, which is really the center of Qawwali music traditionally. We were sitting with one of the Pirs, one of the Gali Nashin, who are like the tomb holders, the lineage holders from that particular Sufi master, whose shrine it is, who's, 900 years ago. And we were just having chai and talking about it, and he was especially open-minded, as many of them are. And I was like, it might be a good idea to just give permission to Amina to play. It's not a bad idea. It might raise some eyebrows, but consider it. And he was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, she can play. We were like, really? And apparently, according to the history books and the people there, a woman's never played at that shrine at the Urs, which is, thousands upon thousands of people listening to the Qawwali for that 5 days of nonstop Qawwali. And yeah, she just stepped up to the plate, and we played, and it was a big deal. And that year, we played a couple of very traditional Qawwalis, like Man Kunto Mola, which is the oldest Qawwali, and Dil Jise Zinda Hai. And we were very respected for it. And they make DVDs of all the best Qawwali of that particular year, of that Urs. And ours was like the highest selling DVD of that year. Of course, for many reasons, us being just quite a novelty, like you say. But from that point, successively, year after year, different shrines throughout India, throughout Pakistan, have welcomed her and given permission to her as the first woman to play, let alone the first white woman and white Qawwal. And yeah, so it's really transcended a lot of barriers. But a lot of these masters that hold the shrines and that whole spiritual system of organization around them have really welcomed her in to do that because of, I heard she played in Pakistan, the rumor spreads quick, and she's been given permission. You know, now when we've played at a lot of these shrines, dozens and dozens of times, it's been a very special path.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. I mean, it reminds me also of just my experience with Sufis, limited, but you know, I've had some both in the West and in India. Is this a kind of openness? I mean, there is this sort of fire, and you say that if you look in the Sufi tales or whatever, there's a kind of rebellious, even trickster quality, and it would make sense that with the living spirit of that, especially given the devotion to the music and the you know, the passion as well as the discipline that you guys represent, that there would be a kind of an openness there. But in a larger you know, picture, what makes that so inspiring to me anyway is just to see people who are able to engage with an aspect of Islam, setting Sufism by itself aside for a second, and have that kind of openness. So it's not even just that you guys sort of represent a bridge between the West and this amazing tradition, you know, both for people who are in the tradition who are like, wow, these guys really get it. This is great. And then also you go out and you play places like Symbiosis or Beloved, where I saw you play these West Coast festivals, and then you're representing this music to people who don't know anything about it, but you're doing it in a devoted way, and you're trying to introduce people into it. So you're really acting as a bridge musically, but there's also something, it's a spiritual bridge too. And you have people in the West watching your music, hearing your music, and getting caught up in it. And we're singing about Allah, and I think that's incredibly important right now. I mean, you know, with the stress with Islam and all the things we could talk for hours about. But I did want to ask you about how you feel, to the extent that you're part of a Sufi current, but you're also part of a larger current of Islam, and you know, whatever you want to talk about your personal religious beliefs or how you've come to appreciate Islam as a larger umbrella of a world religion. I'm curious how it feels to sort of be in this ambassador sort of role, particularly when you're playing for Western audiences.
Yeah, truly. A lot of what we're trying to bridge as far as that goes, for example, the Islamic culture and the Sufi culture of the East with the West, comes through the film that we're finishing called Music of the Mystics, that really goes deeper into that whole connection. And it's more of like a cultural, cross-cultural, informative sharing there, as well as how we can translate the kalams, the Qawwali songs, between sets and between presentations of each one, to try to really deepen the understanding of some of the spiritual and cultural metaphors that are in that current of music, because they are quite profound. And it's not something we've really chosen in the sense of we want to change the whole perspective of Islam in the West. It's something that just has happened through our love of the music and our sharing of the music. And just like Amina and I, you know, the group has been deeply connected to Islam and to Sufism. For example, me and Amina, even before we learned Qawwali, even met each other, we were both initiated into Sufism by a Sufi master, different Sufi master, and also embraced Islam in that whole process. And it really depends where and in what setting we play. For example, most of our shows, maybe like 60%, are for people that come from Pakistan and from India and are Muslim. So that's already sharing something from within their culture that they really appreciate and know well. Especially, for example, like in a week we're heading to the UK. We tour all over the UK and then North Africa and France and this and that. And that's mostly people from families that have emigrated there 1 or 2 or even 3 generations before. And they're just completely stoked that Qawwali is coming to their town, because it's rare that Qawwali masters have the freedom that we do, or even the organization and management that we do that we can play in so many places in the West, so people appreciate it in that way. And the Pakistani listeners really value that we are spreading a good message about Islam, like sharing a very universal and beautiful element of that to the West, to Western audiences. And sometimes, they'll even be like 50-50. There'll be 50% people from the Indian subcontinent natively, and then 50% Westerners, whether it's in Australia or the UK or America or Canada or whatever. So they really appreciate that and see the beauty of that, like you say, in this time where there's a lot of negative opinions on Islam because of all the politics going on and a lot of misunderstandings because there's just one side of that picture that's being presented to people, and it's hard. I can, empathize that it's hard for people in the West to say a place like Australia where most people don't get the opportunity to be in Pakistan or India and be exposed to that Muslim culture that exists there. It's very hard to see something beyond what's being presented again and again through the media. So it's a really special and precious gift to be able to share something that's very universal and loving and spiritual, that's a different shade, a different perspective on a religion that is often presented from one side, as you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a debate, quite a big debate among a lot of whatever pundits that whether or not Islam is like inherently violent. So there are people who know something about the religion who argue that there's something essentially wrong about the religion that leads to the kind of extremism that we see. I myself do not believe in this at all, and I think that this is actually a very harmful line of argument, but many people have it. And I sometimes think about it and I read their things and I go, no, it's not right. No, you can say the same thing about Christianity. No, that's not right. And then I go, what's wrong here? What's missing here? And what I've come to is that these people have they cannot respond to there's no way in which they can fall in love with it. Like there's some way in which even if it's a religion that you don't end up practicing, there's a way in which you greet a religion by, for me, or religious art or devotional music or a ritual or text or whatever, is you just kind of open up and say, like, what is its particular flavor? What is its special, unique juice that from this flower? And for me, I think it's really important to have art and culture associated with religions available for people because it's a way in. It's like they can go, well, yes, clearly ISIS is a problem, but I really love this Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan record, and it's like really beautiful in a way that's specifically religious as well as universal in its energies or its devotions. There's also something very specific. So I think it's a really important work beyond the musical sphere that you're doing. And in having that responses. So I'd like to also ask how was it like playing, like, as I said, I saw you at Beloved at these sort of West Coast hippie neo-tribal festivals where there's a lot of electronic dance music, which is most certainly a non-traditional environment for Qawwali, but it's not a non-spiritual one because you have a lot of people there who are probably more like you were when you were a teenager. They're interested in different traditions, they're spiritual seekers, they're mixing this and that, but they're not necessarily people who have found a traditional path or are even devoted to a particular religion, but there's still sort of a general spiritual seekerness that's going on in these environments. What's it like to bring this kind of tradition into that sort of open-ended environment of sort of spiritual eclecticism in the West?
Well, ultimately, it's definitely a blessing for us, and in many ways, it's the kind of setting and demographic of people that we relate to on a lot of levels. It's very diverse. A lot of the events we do, we are forefront in a lot of those transformative kind of festivals because there's a it's like a folk culture in a lot of ways where people are attracted to like the groovy beats and the whole scene where there's dancing and socializing. And Qawwali is also has that folk element to it, where the music is really uplifting and really groovy and very animated and passionate. So that connects to that kind of culture in a lot of ways. Yet in the whole traditional setting, there's that cultural kind of system of reverence that goes with the music that is missing, because it's not just kind of looking for the next fix or the next dose of bliss and fun. Although it is very blissful, the whole setting at the shrines and the music, there's this reverence for something um, much greater than just self gratification there, through the religion and through the just the whole spiritual atmosphere of devotion. And it's very universal in the same way as a festival would be. At the shrines, there's people from all religions, all genders, all different castes and creeds, and from different social demographics. It's really beautiful the way that the Sufis have really passed that on through their tradition of like one of the main ways that the Sufis really spread their message in the Indian subcontinent in the history of this music is that they transcend a lot of the caste divisions that were current in India at the time. I mean, India's still got this caste thing going on, and it's really quite hidden in a lot of ways now with the overshadow of Western culture and people taking on different employments and this and that. But it's something that runs really deep in that culture, where somebody is born into a certain profession or like level of profession, whether it's from like a sweeper to a salesman role and up the ranks. And one of the things, like for example, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti Rahmatullah alayhi, who was really the first big Sufi master of the lineage that made a huge impact in the Indian subcontinent over 900 years ago. One of his ways of breaking through that caste barrier was to feed people. And so, like at the Gurdwara, like at the Sikh temple, or at the mandir, at the Hindu temple, they feed people. So there's people doing seva, being involved in selfless service of making food. And it's pretty cool at the shrine. They still do it 900 and some years later. They have these huge cauldrons where they make a khichdi type thing, like a vegetarian uh, dish, and that's served to everyone. And in that time, it was the same way. So people from different castes or different religions would sit together and eat this food, and that was prohibited in a lot of of the caste structure at that time. So people really valued this, and it's been carried on till this day that that there's no distinction between people as far as on that spiritual setting of someone being exalted over somebody else. And in the festival scene and in the Western culture, everybody is also has that kind of equality, which is really beautiful. And there's just that level of reverence that we're trying to bring to it through just, I mean, people feel it when they hear the music, and they hear the way that we sing and where that singing comes from. It's not like a entertainment for the most part. I mean, there is that element of engagement through entertainment, but there's this deep reverence that transcends somebody's personal expression. And I think that has the power of bringing that spiritual message just in itself all the way across between cultures. And the rest is just being able to explain what the traditional setting is, what the meaning of the lyrics are, what the whole cultural and spiritual design is behind this music, what fuels it, and sharing a little bit and a little bit. Now, 20 years into it, people that come to these festivals like Beloved and have seen us several times, I start to understand it and see it and feel it in a deeper way. So that bridge is strengthened bit by bit, and it does take a lot of time to cross that barrier of East and West, and from like a shrine to a electronic music festival. But it seems to be happening naturally in that way.
I'm curious about your own growth, spiritual growth, as when you entered into music and we started to establish these relationships with masters in a more traditional situation in Pakistan, where you'd be staying there for a while. Like how did you come to sort of open up to the deeper dimensions of Islam, like almost aside from the specific, the stories of the Qawwals, or the who you're singing about, or the images of the lyrics, but at the same time you're also going into a deeper current with the religion. How did that sort of develop in you? Or was it the same for all the folks in the group? I imagine that people had different ways of kind of getting into the current that in many ways you now ride. It's not part of your existence.
Yeah, everybody in the group has a very unique and colorful history behind where we've come to as singing this music as a group. Each of the stories are very worth hearing individually. Yeah, and I guess I'm kind of the spokesperson for the group in a lot of ways because I understand the music um, in a more comprehensive sense. But we've all spent time deeply engaged with yoga and long term meditation and travel and meeting of masters and teachers. And Islam really attracted me personally because in that whole spiritual search that I was engaged in my teens, I connected with a Sufi community, and they were all from different parts of the world, mostly different parts of Africa and South Asia. And what really attracted me especially was the way that we'd sit together and pray together and eat together. There was this communal aspect there, and the power of the devotion was just magnified. The unified field happening spiritually when people in unison sing in devotion or pray in devotion was extremely powerful. And they're so open-minded and universal. Most Sufis are, and meant to be at least. So that's what really drew me in as far as Islam goes. But even the Qawwals and the Sufi masters know that the actual experience, spiritual experience that we strive for, that comes to us, it really transcends religion. And even in the lyrics, there's this whole element of just forgetting all those rules and ethics and right and wrong that come from that basis of religion. There's a transcendence of it in that experience, in that divine experience. And people have their own ways, their own paths to get to that place. And like I said, in a lot of ways, it's just a spontaneous thing. And those who know um, about spirituality, have experienced it, know that it's a transcendence of all those kind of yeah of religion and ethics behind it. And Qawwali is very clear in the way that it also says that in the lyrics and in the teaching, so that we have to let go of all of our all of the judgments and all of the personal perspectives and opinions in that spiritual quest. And for me
Is there a
personally,
particular Is
go
there a
ahead.
particular tune you can think? I was wondering if there was a particular tune or lyric that comes to mind that captures that spirit.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's very rebellious and raises a lot of eyebrows with the very religious people who stick to their belief systems quite solidly. Like there's the classic line like one lover was in the temple, another in the mosque, but to me, submerged in the color of divine love, both are the same. And there's a lot of quite heavy lyrics like even if I have to spill my wine on my prayer rug to see my beloved, I will surely do it. Or crossing the stream to get to the beloved, I have to tatter my robe or soil my robe, which is like a metaphor for dignity, that kind of thing, where transcending our mundane existence of being a separate individual with our opinions and rules has to be transcended. There has to be willingness to let that go for that God experience, that union, that fana.
And one aspect of that that's reflected in the music is that you've been talking about spontaneity, you've been talking about letting go, is just the fact of improvisation that when you're performing, you're what's coming out immediately is never something you've never done before. You're moving within traditions, you're moving within specific rags, but there's something else that's happening. And I'd love to hear you talk about, since I've seen you perform, and you have a wonderful voice, and it's quite stirring. And what it's like to have that sort of improvisatory relationship to spirit in a musical sense.
Yeah, it's very deeply linked. There's this whole thing of words can't describe God, they can only negate what isn't. And music seems to be like a stepping stone to a different level in that respect. And the words of the Sufis are very profound as far as I see it, as far as being able to express deep wisdom about spirituality. Basically, like, as far as words can go, I really feel in all my studies of religion and spirituality that the Sufi poetry really goes out that to that very limit of pointing to the divine, and music takes it a step further as far as I feel it, because we're giving life to those ancient verses that could be 500 years ago written, or 100 years old, or 900 years old, when the words of these masters that are timeless are sung with that passion and that love and that feeling. There's this divine energy that comes into them. And in Qawwali, there's, like you say, there's so much improvisation. You really can't have Qawwali without improvisation. There's not just the standard arrangement. You just play that and that's it. It's meant to be improvised on in the way that want to boost the power of those lyrics and of the melody, the raga, the sentiment of the raga, of the melody that goes with that. And there's many different elements of improvisation, technically speaking, like there's bolbhant or gira, which is adding different lines of poetry that deepen the text or the subject being expressed. There's tan and alankar and ahmad. These are all different kinds of ways of improvisation. And like I was saying earlier about the whole spiritual element, there's this importance of transcending the lyrics. Just like anything, there's all the steps that go with it. So religion being the base, you could say, which is like an ethical system of life and how to interact with other people kindly. And then there's that spiritual mysticism, like Sufi path. That's that deeper relationship with God beyond just what to do and not to do. And then the music in the Qawwali is meant to take it beyond that, where even forget the meaning of the words themselves and just be in that ishq, that divine state. And improvisation plays a really important role in that because, like you say, it's a spontaneity. It's something that's live and in the current, the present, where God exists. So the music is never really powerful or meaningful in its traditional setting unless the improvisation is deep and sincere and passionate. So the Qawwals are always trying to outdo each other in a friendly way of expressing more and more, drawing out of the lines, like expressing something that can't be expressed easily, and that comes from opening up to that creative spontaneity of improvisation in that spirit of devotion. And a lot of the improvisation is just in what we call akar, which is just awe. So we'll be singing a line and somebody will feel this inspiration to improvise off of that line, for example. And it's just a feeling, it's just an expression of devotion. And the creativity is that divine spontaneity of just a pure emotion, just a pure expression of devotion that's a step beyond the words themselves.
Well, wonderful. I think we'll leave it there. We'll go out with that track. And Tahir, once again, thanks for joining us on Expanding Mind.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, good luck on your tour, and well, I look forward to seeing Music of the Mystics.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Till next week, keep your minds open.
से फरिश्तों ने इकबाल की गमाज़ी करता है कुदरत की नाबंदी उस्ताद है करता फितरत की नाबंदी खाकी है मगर इसके अंदाज़ है अफला के रूमी है ना शामी है ना समरकंदी रूमी है
बख्शी न सबर कंदे
सिखलाई है फरिश्तों का आदम की तरफ इसने आदम को सिखाता है आदम खुदा वंदी दयार इश्क में